and welcome to the Lunch and Learn webinar series. We appreciate you joining us today. And as you may know, ISM has now merged with SWK, so we have a lot more people attending our Lunch and Learns. We welcome everyone. SWK also has the largest SAGE affiliate VAR program, so we would also like to welcome all of our PSP customers. If you have any questions on the SWK and ISM merger for any of our programs, please let us know. You can always reach out to us at camteam@swktech.com. My name is Sherry Colombo, and I am one of your SWK customer account managers, and it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Today we'll be looking at tips and tricks for Crystal Reports with our own senior consultant, Mr. George Warchus. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. All lines will be muted to prevent background noise and confusion during the presentation. We will open up the lines at the end for questions. And if you do have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat box at the bottom of your GoToWebinar sidebar and hit send question to staff at any time during the webinar. The webinar will also be recorded and distributed after the presentation for your convenience. So without further ado, let me turn this over to George so we can get started. George, it's all yours.
Hi there, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started with some basic tips and tricks and some basic usage on the Crystal Report software. In this version, I'm going to share a little bit with Sage. I know there's some other customers that might be out there using different platforms, but essentially the tools are the same. We'll go ahead and get started with some of the basics that I like to run through prior to going into the Crystal Report. So in Sage and in every program, you should see something that's has a definition of the file layouts, and what we use these for are to basically gather information about what type of report we want to use. For other systems that you're going to be using, you might want to reach out and figure out where those file locations and program information is, so that you can plan out your report a little better. In Sage, and I'll use that as the base. In Sage, down here at the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see program information. This contains the file layouts and the program information. This is a pretty powerful tool for using, for getting the design of the report correct. So in Sage, as most of us use Sage know, there's header and their detail records, and the header information contains information about the customer or the vendor or whatnot, and the detail lines contain information about the actual items or products that you're selling and anything related to that as far as price, quantity, things like that. And here under file layouts is where we usually work. And I'll just use accounts payable since it's at the beginning there. In accounts payable, it lists out every single file that's in the AP system. So in this case, I'm just going to pop down here and look at the AP vendor file, because that'll give us a good idea of what we're looking at as far as the vendor file is concerned. So in here, you can kind of see it looks a little bit programmatic, which is fine. It just has the name, the column name of the field that you're looking at, what type of field it is, whether it's a multi-key or multi-line field, and the links. So this is a two-linked field. And then it gives you a little brief description about the field. Where this gets helpful is like in the statuses, or like down here, vendor status. So when you're looking at different vendor status, you might see an A, an I, or a T, and it kind of shows you, okay, that's active, inactive, and temporary. And that'll help you when you're working with your Crystal Report to kind of define a formula or a variable set on that particular item. Like I could say, oh, I only want to see everything that equals I, or I only want to see everything that equals A. And so this is a good tool for looking through that process and figuring out what your data elements are that you're going to be working with. I always like to show this in the beginning just because a lot of people don't even know this is here. If you have any questions about where that is, refer back to the video, or there's actually an article on the Sage site that kind of explains how to get this file out. So you can have it in a PDF format when you're using it. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the Crystal Reports. And we're just going to be working in the standard version. This one is 2011 for Sage 100. I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank report. And in the blank report, you'll see where we have our connections. These are the standard ODBC connections that are made available to you when you install the system. On other operating systems, it might actually work the same. I know that you can create a SQL connection, you can create different ODBC or RDO connections. And if you want to do that, you can do that down here. You can also set up repositories, things like that. You can also do it directly from Access or Excel. So there's really no limit to the amount of data that you can link to. You will find that linking to certain files can cause, different reactions, and we'll go over some of that towards the end of the presentation here. So I'm going to just open up this SODA 91, which is Sage's default ODBC connector, and then I'm just going to log in. I can also prompt to use different companies. So whatever company is displaying in the Sage database logon, whatever one's attached to that ODBC, I can open. So if I had 100 different companies in here, obviously this list is going to be a lot longer. Here we're just going to go ahead and use the ABC distribution company and just roll with that. So I'm just going to sign in. And in here, you're going to see the basic fields that are available to me. Now, there isn't it's not sorted by module or anything like that. So a good trick is if you're going to be working in the BR module, you can click here on this area and just type in BR and you'll see it kind of pops to the BR. Same thing if you want to go to IM. It's a little faster to move around like that, I found, rather than just scrolling up and down everything trying to get to the one you want. So if you have a general idea what module you're going to work in, it's a little bit easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull in that AP vendor file. We're just going to do a simple little report here. And we'll just bear with me. I'm going to find the file. Here we go. All right, so we'll just pull in some basic information. I'll just kind of show you how to manipulate and work with it. So in here on the right-hand side, you'll have Field Explorer. And some of you might open up Crystal and not have this field, not have this at all. Your Crystal might look like this. And the way you would add that is just coming up here. You're going to go to View, and you're going to go to Field Explorer, and then it'll drop it on the right-hand side. It should stay there for you, and then you'll be able to access these tables. So inside of the AP vendor file, you can see it's kind of showing you everything that's in that file, everything that's available to us to report on in that file. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab some fields and dump them over to my Crystal reports. The details section is where you line things. So if you look at this report layout, you have the report header, you have the page header, the details, the report footer, and the page footer. So a real quick way to define this report header is it's only going to show up once. If you print this, it's only going to show up the first time at the top of the report, and it's only going to show one time whether you have 100 pages or not. The page header is kind of like where you're going to have your header information, and it's going to show up on every page that gets printed. So a lot of times people will put, the information that they want to show up on every page, or just aesthetic looking stuff in the page header so that it repeats the columns, etc. during the process. And you'll notice when you drop the field into the details section, the AP division number or whatever field you're working with actually gets populated there as well. So it's kind of a nice little feature. One of the things to note on this is that it always comes in underlined. So you can take that off. You can also just take this is just a text field, and you could just put AP div or something like that. So you can actually make your own fields, your own comments, your own text there. You just can't change this field. If you see when you're hovering over it, you have the definition of what table you're looking at or what field you're looking at inside the table. So the page header information, the stuff that gets dropped in, you can change, you can make it whatever you want. This table needs to stay the same name so that it can relate to it across the board. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop in some more. And again, like I said, the details section is the stuff that's going to contain the data. So in the header, we know that we want AP division, we want the AP vendor number. When I preview this, and I'll just do it quickly, you'll see that it's going to go through the file set and it's going to put everything in order here. And so that's kind of what you're looking for. What I did here to get to this place is I just hit this button here, which is the refresh button. That goes out, grabs all the data, pulls the data down for whatever you have set in your variables here, and produces a preview of the page. If you want to get back to the design tab, or where you were designing it, where you had the ability to drop, you just click design here, and now you're back to the designer. So you have preview and you have design. So pretty cool that you can kind of work through it while you're actually doing it. The other thing you can do is you can do it in preview too. It's just a little harder. You lose the grid name. So I could come in here and kind of drop this in here. And now I have all that. So you can do on the fly as well. I find it a little bit more challenging. It depends on the situation. If you're just doing like a quick birthday list, or if you want to, you know, do a quick mail merge document to get vendor addresses in there or whatnot, then doing it in preview would probably work. Otherwise, try to stick to designer. You're going to be able to align it better. You're going to be able to use it a little bit easier. One of the things that you'll notice is, you know, you're getting kind of close to running out of space over here. So if I drop in, you know, address line 1 or 2, I probably want it to go underneath this information. So you can always drag this down, make this bigger, larger, however you want to do it. And then I can come in here and I could say address line 1, address line 2, and so on and so forth. There's a wide array or a wide variety of YouTube videos out there on how to link these together, because what you can do is you can create a formula with these addresses, and you can say, okay, give me the city plus the state plus the zip, and you just create a little formula that takes this information and puts it in a nice little display. But for right now, for our purposes, and just kind of showing you what's going on, I'm just going to keep it simple and just drop this stuff in. So now when I hit refresh here, it's going to ask me if I want to refresh. And you can kind of see now it looks a little different. One of the things to notice here as well is that whenever you drop in a field underneath, you're still going to have those tabs up here. So people will arrange the tab like this, and they'll go, okay, this is additional address information, or they might change this, or they might just delete it because it's pretty, you know, straightforward what it actually is. So we'll just leave it like that, just to kind of keep it simple. And so that's kind of a basic little rundown of data and how to get it into the design of the report. What I want to do is kind of show you a little bit about how to select with formulas. So now that I have all of this stuff, and I don't have a lot of divisions here, so what I'm going to do is add in like a vendor number or something to that effect. So that I can do a reference sort on it and make sure that I am able to only select a certain array of data that I want. So in here, I'm just going to go ahead and create this. Simply, I'll just say, let me sort by the record, and the record is defined in the detail section. I'm going to sort by vendor name, and I want to make it where it's only equal to airport or airway property. So let's do this one. So I'm just creating a quick, simple selection that says, hey, I only want to see anything that's airway property related. And this works out real good when we're in the details section. I'll kind of go over some of that when we cover the grouping in a few minutes. But basically, you're basically sorting the data like you would in an Excel spreadsheet. You're doing like a little group and saying, hey, I only want to see this particular item. The other thing that's groovy about this is you can come into Select Expert and you can select record, and you can do like a selection on a formula like a start range or an end range. So you have a bunch of values here. You know, you can select is any value, which is basically going to give you everything. You can say it's everything that's equal to what I say, which is, you know, like how we just did, or you can say it's not equal to airway property. So if I said it was not equal to airway property and I refresh the data, I'd get everything but airway property. Obvious, it's pretty straightforward. Another thing you can do is you can select like a one of statement. So I could say is one of, and I could say I only want airway property, and maybe I want IBM. And so if you look in here, I'm creating this little value that says, I'm only selecting this one, and I can keep adding to the list if I want to. But for now, I'll just say that and hit refresh. And now I should only see airway and IBM. And of course, if you don't want any of those, you can just come in here, hit record, and then you can just click on delete. And once you do that, report goes all the way back to normal. So In the grand scheme of things, as far as working with header information, it's pretty basic stuff. What I'm going to do is jump over into a detail file. So we can do some informational sorting, so we can do some grouping, things like that. So I'm going to kind of back up here a little bit. I'm just going to take this stuff out, but this also touches on another point that I wanted to mention. So within each of these fields, I can align them with my mouse, obviously, or I can use my arrow keys. So if I use the arrow key, I can move it around, and that's kind of what I'm doing now. You'll notice that it keeps the header in place if you move it left to right. Or if I want to do a group of a bunch, right? So let's say I just wanted to take this whole area. I can right click and drag, and now you'll see it's highlighted all those fields that I put in there. The only thing that it doesn't do is it won't take out the header information. So I'm just going to hit delete there, and apparently it does. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and shrink this back up, and then we're just going to start with some detail information. So I'm just going to pull this all out, and I'm going to select a different file. So right now I have the AP vendor file in there. I need some detail information. I'm going to take this out. We may come back here and link this back. And anytime you want to do this, you can just change to the database expert, and you can basically highlight and remove. And then you could say, I want to select again, and you're just basically picking it up. And in this point, in this particular one, we'll go ahead and pick, let's see, we'll do invoice history detail, and we'll grab the header as well. So I'm going to grab the invoice history header and detail, and I'm going to link those up. I may not use anything out of the header because I'm really looking to do a file with the detail information mostly. But it's always a good idea, and especially in this age, I'm not sure about the other software ERP systems out there, how they're functional, but I'm pretty sure they probably have a header and a detail, or they might have like a stored transaction file that's history, and then like a standard vendor file, and that's something that, again, you'll need to refer back to your manual, to your consultant to help you with. But in this case, we're going to grab the header, we're going to grab the detail, and we're just going to link the two together. So now if you look in here, you see that I have the header and the detail. And typically when you do that, the detail or the header, the detail information, which has all the transactional items, will show up first, and the header will show up below. And in this case, I'm just going to start pulling some data in. So I'm just going to do that, and bear with me 1 second. So while I line that up, I'm just going to kind of create room to make my vendor there, and then create the invoice number and probably some other information in there as far as like an item code or etc. And you'll see here we kind of run out of space. And I kind of wanted to do that on purpose. So I want to show you how to adjust that. And basically it works like any other module or any other reporting type of tool, whether it's like Excel or whatnot. You're just going to modify the page setup section. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. And what I've always had luck with is just changing it to 14. Sometimes I'll go way out. It doesn't really matter because when you're printing it, you can kind of shrink it down to size, and it'll line up anyway. So let me put my num lock on, and I'll get that 14 in there. All right, and then I'm going to set it to be landscape. So now you can see I have a lot more area to work with, and I have a scroll bar down here it's created. So I'm going to go ahead and drop some more data here, and then we'll start to work on the grouping. Okay, so right now if I hit the refresh button, I'm just going to get a bunch of invoices with really no group on what customer it belongs to or anything like that. So I'm going to go out to the header and I'm going to grab some of that information. So on this, I'm just going to hit the minus sign. And I'm going to hit the plus sign on the invoice history header. And I'm going to just pop in the vendor number here in the details. Okay, and now I can kind of see, okay, this belongs to that, this one belongs to this. And so I'm going to link them up a little bit better. And now what I want to show you is a little bit of grouping. So right now you can kind of see it looks a little goofy. There's some issues with like how the invoice is lining up or whatnot. So what I'm going to do is just pop in and do a group. I'm just going to head up here and I'm going to hit insert group. And then I'm going to create a group based on whatever field I want to sync up. So for this, I want to do vendor number because that's kind of what I want to do. I want to group all the invoices that are with airway to airway and with, you know, all climate to all climate. So I'm just going to hit OK. And what you should see here is you should see all the invoices that are related to airway come into airway. And you'll see this one is not the same invoice, but it is the same, but it's a different vendor and it's a different amount. So I'm just double checking the detail section. And so now you see what we just did is create a group. So now we have this vendor airway here, and we see all the invoices that are related to the airway group. And then let's say that I want to, you know, see a total of that section. I can click on here and right-click on the field that I want to total, and I can hit insert, and then I can hit summary or running total. I always work with summary. Seems to do the trick for whatever I'm doing as far as reporting on. Sometimes with running totals, you'll use, you know, variables to point out, but it's in a pretty advanced crystal. So I'm just going to show you the summary and keep it simple. And once I select this, it's asking me, what do you want to summarize? And I said, okay, well, I want to summarize the field that I clicked on. So it's going to automatically default to that. And then it's going to ask you what method you want. Mostly you'll just use sum. There are stuff where there are different variables where you can add in averages or maximum or counts, just like you can in Excel. You can basically do the same thing. In here, we're just going to use sum, and we're just going to create a grand total. In this case, what I'm doing is, since I'm working with groups, I'm going to group it together by the vendor number. So I'm going to just do, my total is going to be based on this group, or the group down here, all climate. So I'm going to hit OK. And now you'll see every little vendor, the header is here, the total for all the summary of all the invoices is there. And then I can do cool things like insert text files and say, okay, well, this is looking okay, but I want to create a text file here, and I want to call it, let's back that up. I made that too big. And this is the issue with working in preview. You sometimes drop the field in the wrong spot. So I'm just going to shrink that up. And then in here, I'm just going to do it the same thing. I'm going to hit insert a text object. I'm going to click in here and try to keep it lined up this time. And then I'm going to say total of invoices. And then once I hit OK, now if you come back to the preview section, each one of those sections for the vendor is going to have a total of invoices. So let's talk about a little bit of design stuff here. So if we click on this, and just like in any other program, you have your bold, your italicized, your color change stuff. Same thing here. You can click on here, make it bold, make it italicized, maybe make a total italicized as well. A lot of times what you'll see is in here, you'll see a person come in and say, okay, well, in the design, I'm going to create, I want to create a drop shadow. I want to create a box around something. So they'll come in and they'll create this box. And let's just say they create this here. And then they go to the box setup. So if you turn to the right, if you right click, right click, and you go to the object, hold on one second. You have to physically be on it. So if you click on it, you can get to format box. Once you get to format box, you can do things like border styling, color changes, drop shadow, things like that. So in here, I'm just going to say my color is going to be black. My style is going to be single line. You can make it thicker, bigger, however you want to do that. You can make a drop, or you can take the drop off. You can do a fill color. A lot of times what you'll see is people doing this type of thing where they have like this box here. And so when they come to preview, now you've got a cooler looking report. You can obviously shrink that up, make it bigger. And you'll notice you still have your information printing up here. You could also format that a little differently. Like you could put this air travel, make it a little bit bigger. And if you notice when we did the group, and I'm just going to come back to the design here. If you notice when we did the group, it added this group header file. So wherever you see the report header, now you have the page header, so that prints every page. This is going to print on every group. So you could just make this group bigger and then put vendor number, invoice number, item code, quantity order, and extension amount down in there. And that would make it show up on every page underneath the vendor instead of on top. And what a lot of people will do too is just eliminate those columns, or they'll put, just the extension amount, quantity order, because the rest is pretty straightforward information. So in here, we have this now created this little trick report, and we're pulling it off of data that's, outside of Sage or inside of the current Sage company. And now I want to do some formulas. Let's say I want to take you through a basic formula just to kind of show you how formulas work and how to suppress data. So like, for example here, and I'll show you how to suppress. It's a little bit easy in this environment because we have some $0 invoices. So you probably don't even care to see that. It might make your page go, or your report go from, 1,000 pages to 100 pages if you were to suppress all the zeros. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll right click the detail section. And again, I'm going to come back over to the design because it's just easier to do. In the design section, you'll see that you have details, hide, suppress, section expert. And if you do hide, it's going to hide it. If you do suppress, it's going to completely erase this whole detail section so that you wouldn't even see it. So I'm going to show you that just because I want you to understand what suppress versus the whole line versus just the type of transactions that we want. So I'm going to select this and say suppress no drill down. And you'll see a good way to tell if an item or a line or a header or footer or anything has been suppressed is it will do these lines here like this. So if I come back to preview now, I don't have any detail. I just have, airway properties. This is the total of invoices for whatever time frame that I put in there, right? So you kind of get an idea of how that suppression works. The other suppression, and I'm just going to go back in here and unsuppress it. So if you want to take it off, or let's say you accidentally put it there, you just come back, hit don't suppress, and it'll open it back up, and then again, all your stuff is back. So what I want to show you is how to detail suppress. So I'm going to come into section expert, and you'll see in section expert, you have a couple of different things. You have a report header, page header, all the group header. You basically have all the report variables on the left-hand side of the report here in the details or the design section available to you in here. And so because I clicked on details section, the details section is actually what's going to show up first. So that's kind of nice. And what I'm going to do is just put a little tap in here. So I click on the details section and I say suppress, and then I click on this little X2 button. This X2 button is the formula, conditional formula statement. So we're going to make one. And when you click on that button and you open it, you're going to notice you get this field, you get this formula workshop. And inside the formula workshop, it's saying, okay, well, I know you want to suppress, but what do you want to suppress? And I'm basically going to say, okay, I want to suppress that extension amount. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find the extension amount from the detail. And I'm going to say I want to suppress extension amount. There it is. Extension amount, and I'll say is equal to 0. And then I'll hit X2. This checks your formula. X2 is always going to check your formula. I can save and close it, and it'll tell me if there's an error in that process. But at this point, I just want to check it. I'm in the habit of doing this extra step every single time I write a formula, even on some of the more advanced stuff, just because it helps me not have to dig back into it and figure it out. So I'm just going to check that X2 button. You'll see it says no errors found, which means the formula is clean. And then I'll go ahead and load it. And so now if I did this right, when I come in here, you should notice what's missing. All the ones with 0. So that's a really cool function, because let's say the boss says, hey, I want to see everything for airway properties, but I only want to see stuff that's, I don't care about the little ones. Anything that's over 500, show me, right? You could come into that suppression again and do that same type of suppression here, where you could say sorry, I don't know what's going on with my mouse. There we go. So I can come back into the selection expert, and you'll see once you've modified a suppression, you'll have an X2 there that's red. That means there's a currently modified expression on that particular field or that particular set of data records. So I'm just going to hit X2 here, and I could say, let's go here, and I'm going to just show you the functions, because this is, your additional functions like your arrays, your adds pluses, your greater than or equal to's. Obviously, knowing them is okay. If you do is greater than, equal to, greater than 500. So you can do greater, let me get the right key, greater than 500. And then hit OK. And I'll go back to that in just a second. Let's refresh it. So now I should see, oh, I did it less than. So anyways, so you get the idea. I'm going to go back and fix it, and we'll show you the rest of the functions, because I think that's important to show you. But you can see how the suppression can help you suppress details and suppress data out of the system, and if you need it. So in here, depending on what type of data it is, whether it's a string, a text, a number, or whatnot, you have all these additional functions. And we cover some of this stuff in our advanced classes, where you'll have additional functions where you can set different types of functions or arrays, or set values on dates and times, or here's your math string, here's your math stuff. You also have all your string stuff. So if you're working with a string, you can say, give me this string if the first 3 letters contain CAR, then print that. So you can get really complex with some of the reporting functions as far as using the different functions in there, and you can also do the operators as well. Operators are all the arithmetic commands, same things, ranges, strings, all the variable declarations. So sometimes we'll call out a variable, and we'll set the variable to blank, and we'll just reference that variable to pull a piece of data, a data element in. Again, it's kind of more advanced, and we can get into some of that in our other tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and come back out of here now, and I want to show you guys some other stuff. So right now, even though I hit OK and saved it, it's still got this on here. I'm just going to uncheck this so I get all the raw data back, and just stepping through. So now you can see I still have that form in there, so I'm going to fix that. So another good trick here is whenever you click on this and you hit X2 and it says no errors found, I always just come up here and say save. If you come over here, you always have to come back here anyways, so you might as well just do it first and then come back here. If I didn't do it, I think I did it once and it says, do you want to save, and then you have to drag the mouse all the way back over. Just some little shortcut hints that kind of are helpful. So in here now we have all of this information. We're back to square one, and I kind of want to show you a little bit about formulas. So formulas work the same way that the suppressions work. You're basically adding in a formula, and you're saying, you know, give me a certain type of detail item, but I want it to have all these variables in it so that when it runs or at the time that we print it, it does all these options. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple things. I'm going to create a parameter field for you. I'm going to show you how to work with parameters. So when you're running a report, you could say, I only want to see this range of people or this, you know, date of stuff. So I'm going to add a couple fields into the report, and you'll see here we're kind of cramped over here. So I'm just going to highlight up the all like I did before, and I'm just going to move this stuff over to the left or to the right. So now I have more room, and I'm just going to grab the same here and pull them in. Okay, and then I'll add some date stuff in. So let's go into the header and let's add invoice date. So the date we created this invoice. So now if you look up here, I've got some dates in here, and this is sample data, it's test data. So we're very limited on the range. They didn't put very much in here, but I know I can grab out or suppress, create a parameter on 530. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So over in Field Explorer, when I'm on the parameter field, I'm just going to go ahead and hit new parameter. So I'm going to create a new parameter. I'm going to call this one date. And I'm just going to leave all the variables here alone. I'm not going to have to mess with that too much. Down here, I want to create a range date. So you'll see down here the options, right? I can say allow custom, allow multiple, allow discrete. I'm going to say here, I'm going to select true on allow range values, because that's going to let me set a range. When I'm looking on the panel and I get like a pop-up, it's going to give me this as my setting right now. So I could say enter date, or I could change this to say, please enter start date. Something to that effect. I can make it do whatever I want or say whatever I want. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK there. So now I've set the parameter, right? So how do I get it to recognize the parameter? When I do that, I'm going to come up to select expert again. So you're going to work with select expert quite a bit if you're manipulating data. So get used to this report, select expert, and you're going to select by group or record. So in here, I'm going to say, I'm going to select the rate, the parameter. I'm going to select the range of date, and I'm going to say, I'm going to make it is equal to, and then I'm going to do, let's do, sorry, hold on. Let's do, and the parameter is not showing up. Let me see why. We should have a parameter here now. So when I get the parameter, bear with me. When you do a parameter and it like a date parameter, for example, it should actually show like question mark date. For some reason, it's not doing that, and I think I know why. It's because I made a boo-boo in the back. Let's go back to the parameter and edit it. This needs to be set to date. So when you're working with dates, and it's rare that you'll have to do this on any other field, but when you're working with dates only, you have to go to type and you have to change it to date. It defaults to string, and it just, when it does that, it doesn't work. So now when I'm in here and I'm back up the report and select expert, if I select record, I should be able to say is equal to, and now you see I have my question mark date there. That specifies that it's going to not look at the dates in here. It's going to look at whatever parameter you set up for this parameter. So now I'm going to say date, and I'm going to say OK. And now you'll see you get a date range, or you get your dates here. So one of the things it's not doing is it's still not showing me the range. So I need to hit OK here, and I'll just put in a date so we don't have to deal with it. And I'll just say it's 05/01/2020. So now I should only see invoices with 5/1/2020. If I come back in here and I hit edit, for some reason it didn't allow that. So I'm going to change this back to true and then hit OK. And now you'll see I get an enter starting value and enter ending value. So I could say, give me everything from 05-01-2020 to 05. I know there was some in there from the 30th, so I'm going to say 05-29-2020. And so now you'll see I get pretty much everything that's not a 30 or 29 or whatever. So it's kind of another way. And the other side of that is it also adjusts your formulas, obviously. So anything that you had for a sum formula is now going to change. You'll see some of those $0 ones got moved out. So that's how you do the parameter formula. So essentially what you did by creating that parameter is you basically just created a formula for date fields, right? So there's an alternate way of doing that as well. I can come back out, and if you guys get stuck on that or have questions, just reach out. I mean, it's a quick, a lot of times, like even with what I did, it's just that the variables that it's looking for is like a string or a date, and we have the parameter set wrong. So, and even though I've been doing this for a very long time, I still get messed up on the field sometimes. So you just got to take it slow and take your time and figure it out. Like I said, if you do get stuck or get this beautiful report done and you're having some issues, just reach out. We're always here to help you. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this parameter just because I don't want to use it. I want to show you now how to do it without. So in edit, I'm just going to take it out, and now I just removed the parameter field. So now it's not looking at the parameter field anymore. So let's say in formula, let's say I had a formula where, I don't know, we worked with the suppression, we've worked with a parameter field, but what if I want to do like a formula and say, if this condition is met and this condition is met, then, print the data or whatever. So I'm going to do a quick, simple formula. We're just going to go ahead and create new, and I'll just call this like test formula. I'm doing it on the fly, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to create yet. And here again, you get back to that formula workshop. So you're going to see there's the formula that you just created, and it's going to ask you, well, what do you want to do a formula on? Well, in this case, I want to say, give me, let's see. How about if we could do another dollars formula or something like that? But let's do it on the item code. I could say if, we'll just do an if then else statement. If invoice number is equal to, and let's just say this invoice number is equal to 6598735, and we got to put this in quote because it's a string. Then, and we can say, let's see. It's kind of hard to come up with a formula when you don't have a real business process that you need one for. So if the invoice number is equal to 6598735, then extension amount, let's do extension amount. And I'll just make it equal 0, equals 0. So what this should do if the formula is right, and again, we cover some of the more wild formulas in, or the harder, tougher formulas for like formatting, conditional formulas, and conditional values and things like that. Cover that, some of the advanced features. And again, we always do that too on a consulting basis if you need it. So basically what I'm saying here is if it's equal to this, then just make it say 0, 0. And I didn't get any errors on it, so it should be okay. A lot of times this is where when you start doing stuff like this, like if then else statements, or creating a variable to call another field or whatever, you'll get a lot of issues. And if you notice in here, you'll have crystal syntax and you have basic syntax. And if you'll ever notice, like some of the reports that consultants have done for you or whatnot, they'll get some really crazy formatting in there and some really crazy formulas. And a lot of that stuff's done with like the crystal syntax, or if they need to, they'll switch over to the basic format, the basic syntax, because it just helps with booleans and strings, and depends on the data set. So I'm just gonna hit X2 on here, save it, and then I'll refresh it, and it should just make that 0. Here. We'll find the one I did. So that's kind of how that functions. Again, if you need any further information on it, feel free to reach out. We can help with that. I do want to cover some formatting again on the header page, because if you'll notice, like this kind of looks a little bit funky. So again, same thing with the header. So if you're going to do like a design header, there's a couple key things to remember here when you're working with like your report headers. So I want to cover some of that just because it'll help with formatting, and it's some little tricks there that will help center things, etc. So what I always do when I'm doing like a report header is I'll create a box for that report header. And let me grab that. So I'm going to create this box, and I'm just going to draw this big box here that spans the length of the report. So now I have this data set here. So I have this information. And now what I do is I just create like a text object or a text field within that box. So let's say that this is my monthly AP report, or budgeting report for whatever. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to hit text, and I'm going to drop the text in here. So this is my monthly report. And if you go too far outside your box, it's going to like drop it down. So just remember to pull it over. So once I have this box here, I kind of use that as a guide, and then I move this over, and I move this over all the way to the edge. And I use my box as kind of a guide. Some people don't do that. I don't know. It's either here or there. I kind of like doing it that way. And then in here I say this is my monthly report, and I could put like, the date in here or whatnot, or prepared by or whatever, and just extend it down. So when I print this, I'm just going to pull this box a little bigger, and this one as well. So when you add more stuff, you need to make the boxes bigger. So if I preview this now, it's going to line up so it's perfectly centered over the report. So you can kind of, it's a little bit hard because I've made this a 14-inch report, but if you look, you can kind of see that because I use that base and that border. You can also do it without. I just think that it looks cooler like this. I've always done it like that. And I've always found that dropping the box in is a lot quicker than coming in here, dropping this in, pulling it over, and then, formatting the text and dropping. When you do this, like if you want to come in here, in order to do the font, you have to say each one of these is a line. So left, right, top, bottom. I just find it easier to do box and don't do any formatting on the data, the text element, if you will. So that's kind of why I do it. Other people might have their own reason to do it. And then the other thing is I'll do some shading here. So like, I'll create a shade or create like a background or whatever, just to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing when you're looking at the whole of the report. So now if you kind of look at what I've got here, this is my monthly report, and it's grayed out, and then I, have this. And so I think I have a couple other things I can show you. Let's talk about, I want to show you a sub-report, but I don't know that I have time. It's a little bit more advanced, but we'll probably get it done pretty quickly. Let me see if I have data in the tabs. So hold on a second, and I probably can get this done within 10 minutes. So let me just create a new report. I'm going to grab sales order. I think there's some sales order stuff in here so I can grab. And this is when you're working with sub-reporting, you would do this when you had like the sales order entry file, right? Doesn't match or you can't report sales order invoice stuff together. Like you have to create a sub-report. And the way you do that is to time or to create a sub-report on both files. So one of the files you make the invoice and the header, and then the other you make the sales order stuff. So bear with me 1 second. So you guys know how to add fields. I'm just going to create this really quickly. So right now I'm just going to grab the invoice header and I'm just going to show you some base stuff. So give me 1 second. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just creating this off the invoice header. So right now, if I look at this, I've got my customer number, my invoice number, and my invoice date. And so I want to kind of match up. There's not much happening here, but if I wanted to match it up or marry up the data so I could see, okay, what's coming in to sales order versus what's been billed in sales order. Or if I wanted to like project sales and say, hey, what did a customer do last year? Or now what are they doing this year? So I could create like a marketing report or something where I could have people call and say, hey, you know, you did $1,000 last year and now you're only doing 600. What's the deal? I'm like, what can we do to improve that? And so now I'm going to basically create another report inside of this report. I mean, it's very basic right now, but I do want to touch on it because it's a really good function, and it can really make a difference of some cool stuff. So I'm going to just say, okay, this is going to be sales order, SO orders. And I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm just going to grab the file, and I'm going to grab SO entry, and then, or SO header. And I'll just pull in the same basic fields. So you'll see it makes this big long block looking thing. So and when you're doing a sub-report, it doesn't create the header on the outside of the report, it creates it inside the sub-report. So if you're to look at this, it's going to look really weird. But if you double click on it, then you can set the variables for that piece of reporting. So for that, I want to create the SO header, and I kind of want to marry the two files up. So I want to do customer number, sales order number, and sales order date. So I'm going to say in here, I'm going to grab sales order number, customer number. So customer number, sales order number, and then order date. And this is a little bit more advanced than what you're probably used to seeing. And what I can do is you kind of see how it doesn't match up. So what we do now is we change the subreport link. So you'll see here, if we right click, we can hit change subreport link. And we could say, okay, we want to link it based on customer number. So we want the two to match. So I want my subreport to match my main report. Now if I do this, and now you'll see where I have an invoice here for Avnet. I also have, and it's going to be really different because I don't have anything in this top receipt, and I didn't have a lot of customer invoice number information in the original file. So basically what I've done is I said, okay, here's what they've billed. You know, let's say they did this last year, and you can see that here. And here's what they have on sales order for now. And then I can just clean this up, right? I can take this off and format the subreport so that I don't have borders. So you'll see whenever you do a subreport, it drops in these borders. It's no good. I don't like it. And it's just a personal preference thing for me. And then I can marry the two up, so I can come back into the report and I can get rid of all the stuff I don't need. So let's say like an SO order, I don't need the page header because it's pointless to me. So I'm going to suppress it. I don't even need the information here because it's the same as the other report. All I really want is just the data. So I suppress all of these values, right? And now if I go to preview, you'll see it's going to start lining up, right? So then I could say, okay, I want to just move it up a little bit, kind of marry the two together. And then I could put, you know, an object here that says, you know, this side is invoiced orders. And I could center that. And then this side over here would be currently open orders. So we'll just kind of, and I'm doing this really fast. So if you guys like this and you like what you're seeing and have a use for it, then reach out and we can kind of help you or give you some, you know, guidance on it. It's not that difficult. There is a lot of stuff out on their site too about, you know, just doing trick stuff like this where you're taking two files, merging the data, and creating something even cooler. And that's where you can probably tell in my voice I get a little excited about this because this is a more complicated function, but it's got a really useful business practice. So I did it. We've got 4 minutes left. You know, if you guys have any questions on this, let me know. I mean, I get it. That's pretty basic, but you get the gist of what I'm doing. I'm basically looking at invoiced orders from history, comparing them to open sales orders, and I can give this variables and give this variables and say, give me only everything from 2018 forward, you know, so I can look at last year compared to this year, things like that. So with that, I guess, Sherry, I'll turn it back over to you for questions. If there are any, I know we got 3 minutes. I just wanted to sneak that in there.
I appreciate that, George. Thank you for such great information and all the insightful content you covered today. I want to thank all of our attendees for taking the time to join us today. But before we begin the Q&A, I wanted to let you know that any questions that aren't addressed during the Q&A or any specific questions you may have pertaining to training or pricing for your business can be sent to your CAM or by emailing CAMTEAM, that's CAMTEAM @swktech.com. You'll also get a recording of the webinar so you can rewatch and pick up the tips and tricks that George supplied us. And with that, I did answer a few questions via the chat window earlier that weren't specific to formulas, etc. I am seeing some other questions. This is just a thank you. Thank you, Christy. But I'm going to open the lines if I can. We have a lot of you out there, and it won't let me mass open everything. So if you dialed in with your audio pin, I can open your line for questions. In the meantime, if anyone has a question, please feel free to ask. I'm opening all of your lines as we speak. Any questions out there? Okay, so I did have to remute all lines because we do have somebody place us on hold. Please use the chat pane, or you can raise your hand or use the question pane to ask a question. We'll give you a moment if you need to type something in. Okay, George, I am not seeing any questions come through, so with that, I'm going to thank everyone for their time. Again, if you do come up with a question, please reach out to camteam@swk.com. I'm sorry, swktech.com, and we will forward those questions to George and get your questions answered. So thank you very much for everyone attending. That concludes our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at more of our webinars that we're offering this month. Please check that schedule and join us again. Thanks, everyone.